The moon hung full and merciless in the midnight sky, casting silver shadows across the narrow cobblestone alley where Seraphina Duskwood had learned to make herself invisible. Her white hair, pale as moonlight itself, caught the glow as she pressed her back against the cold brick wall, her red dress a splash of defiance against the darkness. She had walked these streets for 23 years, always alone, always careful, always keeping the beast inside her locked away in a sleep so deep it had never known a single waking moment. Until tonight. The old woman's scream pierced the air like a blade through silk. Seraphina's head snapped toward the sound, her heart already racing before her mind could catch up. Through the fog that rolled thick and wet across the alley, she saw them. 4 men circling a frail figure, whose silver-white hair reminded Seraphina of her own reflection. The woman clutched a small bag to her chest, her eyes wide with confusion and fear, her lips moving in wordless pleas that the men ignored with cruel laughter. Seraphina's fingers dug into the rough brick behind her. Walk away. She had spent her entire life walking away. Her wolf had never stirred, never demanded freedom, never clawed at the cage of her consciousness. She was broken, the elders had said. Incomplete. An omega without a beast was hardly a wolf at all. But the old woman stumbled, falling to her knees on the wet stones, and one of the men raised his boot. Something ancient and terrible shifted in Seraphina's chest. No, she whispered to the darkness inside her. Please no, not now, not ever. The wolf opened her eyes for the first time. It was not gentle, it was not gradual. The shift tore through Seraphina's body like lightning splitting an oak, bones breaking and reforming, skin rippling and erupting with fur white as fresh snow. The red dress fell in tatters around paws that had never touched earth, and the scream that left her throat was human for only a heartbeat before it became something else entirely. Something primal. Something that made the 4 men freeze, their laughter dying in their throats as they turned to face the creature that now stood between them and their prey. Seraphina's wolf was massive, larger than any omega had a right to be, with eyes that burned like molten amber in the moonlight. The beast moved with the fluid grace of something that had been waiting, not sleeping, all these years. Waiting for a moment worthy of its awakening. The men scattered like leaves before a storm, but the wolf was faster, catching the first by his coat and throwing him against the alley wall with enough force to leave cracks in the brick. The second tried to run, but the wolf's jaws closed around his leg, not biting, only holding, only warning. The remaining 2 fled into the fog, their footsteps echoing long after they vanished from sight. Seraphina stood over the fallen men, her chest heaving, her mind screaming at the wolf to retreat, to let her have control back. But the beast was intoxicated by freedom, by moonlight, by the rush of power that came from protecting the weak. Slowly, reluctantly, the wolf turned to the old woman, who had not screamed, had not run, but remained kneeling on the stones with her hands pressed together as if in prayer. Before we continue with the story, tell us where you're watching from and how old you are. I hope you enjoy the story. Thank you, child, the woman whispered, and her voice carried a strange weight, as if it held more than simple words. Thank you for waking. The wolf lowered her head, and Seraphina felt tears, impossibly, streaming through fur and falling like rain onto the cobblestones. The shift back was slower, more agonizing, as if her body was reluctant to let go of this new shape, this new self. When she was human again, naked and shaking in the remnants of her red dress, she collapsed beside the old woman, her white hair plastered to her face with sweat and fog. I didn't want this, Seraphina sobbed. I never wanted this. The old woman's hand, surprisingly strong, gripped Seraphina's wrist. She pulled Seraphina's face up, forcing their eyes to meet, and Seraphina gasped. The woman's eyes were not those of a confused elder. They were sharp, ancient, knowing. They held the kind of wisdom that came from seeing too much, surviving too long. You were always meant to wake, daughter of the moon, the woman said. And now that you have, Fate will find you whether you hide or not. Before Serafina could respond, before she could ask what that meant, the sound of boots on stone echoed from the mouth of the alley. Heavy, purposeful, multiple sets. The old woman's eyes widened, not with fear, but with something else. Recognition. Hope. He's here, she breathed. My son. The fog seemed to part for them, these newcomers, as if even the mist knew to make way. Serafina tried to cover herself, clutching the torn fabric of her dress, but her eyes were drawn inexorably to the figure at the center of the approaching group. He was tall, impossibly tall, with shoulders broad enough to carry the weight of a kingdom. His hair, black as a raven's wing, fell past his shoulders, and a beard framed a face that was all sharp angles and harder edges. But his eyes, gods, his eyes were the color of storm clouds before they broke into lightning, gray and fierce, and scanning the alley with the precision of a predator. Those eyes found the old woman first, and something in that granite expression cracked. The man, who moved like violence barely contained, dropped to his knees beside her with a gentleness that seemed impossible for someone so lethal. Mother. His voice was gravel and silk, rough with emotion. We've been searching for 3 days. Where have you been? The woman, his mother, touched his face with trembling fingers. I got lost, Tobias. The fog came and I couldn't remember the way home. But this girl, she saved me from those men. She shifted for me. Only then did Tobias Ironshade, Alpha King of the Northern Territories, turn his attention to Serafina. The weight of his gaze was like being pinned beneath an avalanche. She watched his nostrils flare, watched his eyes darken as he scented her. Omega, his wolf would be telling him. Omega and newly awakened and vulnerable. She waited for the dismissal, the disgust, the casual cruelty that alphas often showed to those they considered beneath them. Instead, he removed his long black coat, the leather worn soft with age, and draped it around her shoulders with movements so careful she might have been made of glass. Thank you, he said, and his voice had dropped to something softer, something that made her skin prickle with awareness. You shifted for the first time to save my mother. It wasn't a question. Somehow he knew. Perhaps he could smell it on her. The newness of the transformation. The terror still clinging to her skin like morning dew. Serafina nodded, unable to find her voice, unable to look away from him. He was beautiful in the way that dangerous things were beautiful. All leashed power and barely controlled dominance. But when he looked at his mother, when he had touched her face, Serafina had seen something else entirely. I need to take her home, Tobias said, helping his mother to her feet with infinite care. But you. He turned back to Serafina, his eyes searching hers with an intensity that made her breath catch. I owe you a debt. The Alpha King does not forget those who protect his family. He reached into his coat, still wrapped around Serafina's shoulders, and retrieved a card, heavy stock with silver lettering. His hand brushed hers as he passed it over, and the contact sent a shock of electricity up her arm that made her wolf, still so new and raw inside her, lift its head with interest. Come to the palace tomorrow, Tobias said. Let me repay what you've done. Then he was gone, his guards surrounding him and his mother, disappearing into the fog as if they had never been there at all. Serafina remained kneeling in the alley, clutching his coat around her body, the card pressed against her palm like a brand. She could still feel the ghost of his touch, still smell the scent of him that clung to the leather, pine and smoke and something wild that made her newly awakened wolf pace restlessly behind her ribs. The card bore a single address and a name written in bold masculine script. Tobias Ironshade, Alpha King. Serafina walked home through streets that suddenly felt different, as if the world had shifted on its axis the moment her wolf had opened its eyes. Her small apartment above the bakery was cold and empty, as it always was, but tonight the emptiness felt heavier, more profound. She stood before the cracked mirror in her bathroom, staring at her reflection. Her white hair was tangled and wild. Her amber eyes, always unusual, now seemed to glow with an inner light. She touched her face, her neck, her shoulders, searching for some outward sign of the change that had torn through her. But her skin was unmarked, pale and smooth as always. But inside, inside, the wolf was awake and watching. Serafina had been told stories all her life about the shift, about the moment when human and beast became one. But no one had prepared her for this, for the feeling of being two selves in one body, for the constant awareness of another consciousness brushing against her thoughts. The wolf was not aggressive, not demanding, but it was curious, restless, eager to understand this new world it had been born into. "Why did you wake?" Serafina whispered to the mirror, to herself, to the beast inside her. "Why now?" The wolf had no words, but it sent her an image, a feeling. The old woman's face, the fear in her eyes, the need to protect, to save. The wolf had woken because it was needed, because Serafina's human heart had finally wanted something more than it wanted to hide. Sleep claimed her eventually, though it was restless, filled with dreams of running through forests she had never seen, of hunting prey she couldn't name, of a pair of storm-gray eyes that watched her with an intensity that was both terrifying and thrilling. When dawn broke gray and cold through her small window, Serafina woke with the card still clutched in her hand. The edges pressed so deeply into her palm they left marks. She should throw it away. She should forget about the Alpha King and his debt and return to her invisible life. But the wolf stirred inside her, and Serafina knew, with a certainty that terrified her, that her invisible life was over. The wolf would not go back to sleep. It would not allow her to hide anymore. The palace stood on the hill overlooking the city like a crown of stone and iron, its towers reaching toward the sky as if trying to pierce the clouds. Serafina had seen it 1,000 times from a distance, had walked in its shadow, but had never imagined she would pass through its gates. The guards at the entrance checked her card, their eyes widening slightly at the sight of the Alpha King's personal seal, and waved her through without question. Inside, the palace was a maze of corridors and courtyards, of marble floors that echoed with every footstep and tapestries that depicted battles and victories from centuries past. A servant, an older wolf with kind eyes, led Serafina through the labyrinth, up sweeping staircases and down hallways lined with doors. Finally, they stopped before a set of double doors, carved with the image of a great wolf howling at the moon. "The Alpha King is expecting you," the servant said, and pushed the doors open. The room beyond was a study, lined with books and maps, a massive desk dominating the center. But Serafina's eyes went immediately to the figure standing by the window, his back to her, his hands clasped behind him. Tobias Ironshade seemed even larger in daylight, the sun streaming through the window catching the blue-black highlights in his long hair. He wore a simple black shirt and dark pants, no crown, no royal regalia, but his presence was so commanding that he needed no symbols of power. He turned as she entered, and for a moment, neither of them spoke. His eyes traveled over her, taking in the simple gray dress she had worn, the white hair she had tried and failed to tame, the way she clutched her hands together to keep them from shaking. When his gaze met hers, Serafina saw something in those storm-gray depths that made her breath catch. Recognition. As if he had been waiting for her long before last night. "You came," he said, and there was something in his voice, a note of relief, of satisfaction. "I wasn't certain you would." "You commanded it," Serafina replied, finding her voice at last. "An Alpha King's command is not a request." Something that might have been amusement flickered across his face. "I don't command you, Serafina Duskwood. I invited you." There's a difference. He knew her name. She hadn't given it to him. The realization sent a shiver down her spine. Of course he knew. He was the Alpha King. He probably knew everything about everyone in his territory. My mother wishes to thank you herself, Tobias continued, gesturing toward a door on the far side of the study. She's been asking for you since dawn. But first, I need to understand what happened last night. You shifted for the first time to save her. Again, not a question. Serafina nodded slowly. I've never shifted before. My wolf. She paused, searching for the right words. My wolf has been asleep since birth. Everyone said I was broken, that I would never be a true wolf. Tobias moved toward her, each step deliberate, controlled, and Serafina's newly awakened wolf stirred inside her, not with fear, but with interest. He stopped close enough that she could feel the heat radiating from his body, could see the flecks of silver in his gray eyes. You're not broken, he said, and his voice was so certain, so absolute, that Serafina almost believed him. Your wolf was waiting. Some beasts know that the world is cruel, that it will try to break us if it can. Your wolf kept you safe the only way it knew how, by staying hidden until you were strong enough to bear its strength. How can you know that? Serafina whispered. Because I was the same, Tobias said, and the confession seemed to cost him something. My wolf didn't wake until I was 16, nearly too late for an alpha. My father thought I was weak. He tried to beat the beast out of me, tried to force the shift through pain and fear, but my wolf refused until the day my father raised his hand to my mother. Then, it woke. And when it did, he paused, his jaw tightening. It was not gentle. Serafina saw it then, in his eyes, the shadow of old pain, old rage. She understood instinctively that when Tobias's wolf had finally emerged, his father had learned the price of cruelty. The Alpha King did not become king by birthright alone. My mother wants to meet you properly, Tobias said, breaking the heavy silence. But I should warn you, he paused, searching for words, convinced you're something special. She keeps calling you the Moonborn. Serafina followed him through the door into a private chamber, where his mother sat in a chair by the fire, a blanket across her lap despite the warmth of the room. In daylight, without the fog and fear, the woman looked different. Frailer, older. But her eyes, those sharp, ancient eyes, were the same. Child, she said, reaching out a hand toward Serafina. Come here, let me see you properly. Serafina approached slowly, taking the offered hand. The old woman's fingers were cold, her grip weak, and Serafina felt a pang of fear. This woman, the Alpha King's mother, was not well. The confusion of last night had not been caused by the fog alone. You saved my life, the woman said softly. When I wandered from the palace, when I forgot who I was and where I belonged, you brought me back. Not just from those men, but from the fog in my mind. When you shifted, when your wolf howled, it cut through the confusion like moonlight through clouds. I remembered my name, my son, my home. Tears gathered in the old woman's eyes. Tobias moved to her side instantly, kneeling beside her chair, his large hand covering hers with infinite gentleness. Serafina watched the way he looked at his mother, the fierce protectiveness, the tender devotion, and something in her chest tightened painfully. The doctors say it will get worse, the woman continued, her voice barely a whisper. The forgetting. Soon I won't know him at all. But last night, because of you, I had clarity. I had myself back, even if only for a while. I'm glad I could help, Serafina said, and meant it with every fiber of her being. The woman squeezed her hand. You are special, child, moonborn. Your wolf woke under the full moon to save a stranger. That kind of purity, that kind of selflessness, it's rare. The moon has marked you for great things. Mother, Tobias said gently, you should rest. The woman smiled at him, touching his face as she had the night before. My fierce boy, she said, so strong for everyone else, But with her you can be soft. The moon has sent her to you. Don't let her go." Before Serafina could process those cryptic words, Tobias was helping his mother to her feet, guiding her toward the bedroom adjoining the chamber. Serafina waited, her heart pounding, her mind racing. What had the old woman meant? "The moon has sent her to you." It was madness. Serafina was nobody, an omega with a wolf that had slept for 23 years. She didn't belong in a palace, didn't belong near an alpha king. But when Tobias returned, closing the bedroom door softly behind him, and turned those storm-gray eyes on her again, Serafina felt her wolf rise inside her, felt it push against her consciousness, with something that felt dangerously like longing. "My mother has visions sometimes," Tobias said, running a hand through his long black hair. "The sickness in her mind, it gives her glimpses of things. Usually they're fragments, nonsense. But sometimes," he paused, his eyes searching Serafina's face, "sometimes she sees true." "You don't believe I'm moonborn," Serafina said. It wasn't a question. "I believe you're remarkable," Tobias said simply. "I believe you shifted for the first time, something most wolves do before they can walk, to save a woman you didn't know. I believe your wolf is powerful beyond measure. I felt it last night, the strength in your beast. And I believe—" He stepped closer, so close she had to tilt her head back to maintain eye contact, "that I owe you more than gratitude." "What do you owe me?" Serafina asked, her voice barely more than a breath. "A chance," Tobias said. "A chance to know you. To understand why my wolf recognized yours the moment I caught your scent. To discover why I've thought of nothing but you since I found you in that alley." His words hung in the air between them, heavy with implication, with possibility. Serafina knew she should step back, should run, should return to her invisible life and forget this impossible man with his storm-gray eyes and his gentle hands. But her wolf had other ideas. Her wolf wanted to stay, wanted to know him, wanted to understand why his presence made her feel alive in a way she never had before. "I don't belong here," Serafina said, but even she could hear the weakness in her protest. "Then where do you belong?" Tobias asked, and it was a genuine question, not a challenge. "Tell me, Serafina Duskwood, where does a moon-born omega with a wolf as powerful as an alpha belong if not here?" She had no answer. She had never belonged anywhere. Her parents had died when she was young, leaving her to the mercy of distant relatives who saw her as a burden. When her wolf failed to wake, when the years passed and she remained locked in human form, they had cast her out. She had survived alone, invisible, unwanted, until last night, until she had chosen to be seen. "Stay," Tobias said, and this time it was a request, soft and earnest. "Stay at the palace, not as a servant, not as a subject, but as a guest. Let me repay the debt I owe you. Let me—" He paused, and she saw a vulnerability flash across his face. "Let me know you." "For how long?" Serafina asked. "For as long as you wish," Tobias replied. "A day, a week, a lifetime. The choice is yours. I will never command you, Serafina. I will only ask." The word yes formed on her lips before she could stop it, before logic could intervene, before fear could paralyze her. "Yes," she said, and watched something fierce and primal light in his eyes. "I'll stay." The days that followed blurred together like watercolors in rain. Tobias gave her a suite of rooms in the east wing, overlooking the gardens, with windows that caught the morning sun and turned her white hair to gold. The chambers were larger than any place she had ever lived, decorated in soft creams and pale blues, with a bed so comfortable she sank into it like a cloud. Fresh flowers appeared on her table every morning, always white roses, and she wondered if Tobias had chosen them himself, or if he had simply told the servants to match her hair. He never pushed, never demanded, but he was always near, finding excuses to seek her out, to walk with her through the palace grounds, to sit with her during meals. At first, their conversations were careful, polite, two people dancing around the overwhelming attraction that sparked between them whenever they were close. But gradually, as the days turned to weeks, the walls came down. He told her about his duties as Alpha King, the constant negotiations with other packs, the delicate balance of power he had to maintain, the way every decision he made affected thousands of lives. The weight of it would have crushed most people, but Tobias bore it with a quiet strength that took her breath away. She told him about her life before, about growing up in a pack that saw her as defective, about the way she had learned to make herself invisible just to survive. She told him about the hunger that had gnawed at her stomach on cold nights, about sleeping in doorways in church basements when she had nowhere else to go. She told him about the shame that had eaten at her soul, the feeling that she was somehow fundamentally wrong, fundamentally broken. And as she spoke, as she shared these pieces of herself that she had never shared with anyone, she watched his expression darken with a fury that was not directed at her, but for her, on her behalf. "If anyone had harmed you," he said one evening as they sat in the library, his voice low and dangerous, "if anyone had touched you or hurt you in ways you haven't told me, give me their names. I will make them understand the price of such cruelty." The fierce protectiveness in his words made her wolf purr with satisfaction, but Serafina shook her head. "The past is past," she said softly. "They hurt me with neglect and indifference, not violence. And those wounds, while they still ache sometimes, are healing now. Because of you. Because you see me as I truly am." Tobias reached across the space between them, his hand covering hers where it rested on the arm of her chair. "I see you," he said, and the words were a promise, a vow. "And I will spend every day of my life making sure you never feel invisible again." But it was in the quiet moments that Serafina began to understand the truth of him, to see past the crown and the power to the man beneath. She saw the way he spoke to the palace servants, learning their names, asking about their families, remembering details about their lives that most nobles would never bother to notice. She watched him stop in the middle of important business to help an elderly cook carry a heavy pot, his laughter genuine when the woman scolded him for getting in her way. She witnessed him settle a dispute between two pack members with wisdom and fairness, listening to both sides with patience before rendering a judgment that left both parties satisfied. She saw the way he spoke to the palace servants, with respect and genuine interest in their lives. She watched him train with his guards in the courtyard each morning, fierce and unrelenting, moving with a lethal grace that made her mouth go dry. But he was never cruel, never used his superior strength to humiliate or dominate. Instead, he taught, demonstrating techniques and correcting form with patience, pushing his warriors to be their best without breaking their spirits. And when young wolves came to him for mentorship, those struggling to control their shifts or harness their strength, he gave them his time without hesitation, working with them until they found their confidence. And she witnessed his devotion to his mother, the hours he spent sitting with her, reading to her from books she had loved when her mind was clear, holding her hand when the confusion returned and she forgot who he was. Serafina would stand in the doorway sometimes, watching, her heart breaking for both of them. She saw the way his mother would look at him with fear, asking who he was, where she was, why this strange man was in her room. And she saw the way Tobias would smile through the pain, his voice infinitely gentle as he said, "It's all right, Mother. You're safe. I'm Tobias, your son. I love you." Even when the words didn't penetrate the fog, even when his mother pushed him away, he never lost his patience, never showed anything but love. It was during one of these episodes that Serafina truly fell in love with him. His mother had been particularly agitated, convinced that Tobias was an intruder come to harm her. She had struck him across the face with surprising strength, her nails leaving scratches on his cheek. The guards had moved to restrain her, but Tobias waved them back, catching his mother's hands in his with infinite gentleness. "Mother, it's me," he said, and his voice cracked slightly. "It's your Toby. Your little boy who used to hide in your skirts when the thunderstorms came. Remember? You would sing to me. You would tell me I was brave. For a moment, recognition flickered in the old woman's eyes. My Toby, she whispered, touching his wounded cheek with trembling fingers. I hurt you. I'm sorry. I'm so sorry. You could never hurt me, Tobias said, and kissed her forehead. Never. Serafina had slipped away then, tears streaming down her face, her heart so full of love for this man who showed such tenderness, such devotion, that she could barely breathe. She understood in that moment that the true measure of strength was not in how fiercely you could fight, but in how gently you could love. And Tobias Ironshade, Alpha King, warrior, leader, loved with a gentleness that defied his fierce exterior. That night, when he came to her chambers, exhausted and hurting, Serafina drew him inside and tended to the scratches on his face with healing salve. He sat quietly, letting her care for him, his eyes closed, his breathing deep. When she finished, she cupped his face in her hands, careful of the wounds, and kissed him softly. You are the strongest man I have ever known, she said. Not because of your power or your title, but because of your heart. Tobias opened his eyes, and the vulnerability she saw there stole her breath. With you, he said quietly. I don't have to be strong all the time. With you, I can just be Tobias. Is that enough? That's everything, Serafina said. You are everything. One evening, as the sun set in streaks of amber and rose, Serafina found him in his mother's chamber, his head bowed, his shoulders shaking with silent tears. The old woman slept fitfully, her breathing shallow, and Serafina understood that time was running out. She moved to his side without thinking, her hand coming to rest on his shoulder, offering what comfort she could. Tobias looked up at her, and the grief in his eyes was so raw it stole her breath. I'm losing her, he said, his voice breaking. Every day, more of her slips away. Soon she won't know me at all. Soon she'll be gone, even while she still breathes. Serafina knelt beside his chair, her hands covering his where they gripped the arms with white-knuckled force. I'm sorry, she whispered. I'm so sorry. He turned his hand over, lacing his fingers through hers, and the contact sent warmth spreading through her chest. You gave her a gift that night, he said. You gave her clarity, however brief. You gave her back to me, even if only for a moment. I'll never forget that. In the weeks that followed, Serafina found herself drawn deeper into the life of the palace, into Tobias's life. He began to include her in his daily routines, seeking her presence not just in quiet moments, but in the midst of his work. He asked her opinion on matters of state, genuinely listening to her perspective, valuing her insights even when they differed from his own. She found herself sitting beside him during council meetings, at first intimidated by the powerful wolves who gathered in the war room, but gradually finding her voice, speaking up when she saw injustice, or when she thought there was a better way. The other wolves, the nobles and advisors who had served the crown for decades, watched with barely concealed curiosity and whispered speculation. Some were hostile, seeing her as an outsider, an Omega who had bewitched their king. Others were cautiously respectful, recognizing that Tobias's regard for her was genuine and deep. But all of them quickly learned that any disrespect toward Serafina would be met with the full fury of their Alpha King. The first time a noble made a cutting remark about her origins, suggesting that a former stray had no business in the royal court, Tobias had gone very still. The temperature in the room seemed to drop as he turned his storm-gray eyes on the offender, and when he spoke, his voice was soft, which somehow made it more terrifying. Serafina is my guest, he said quietly. She is under my protection. And if I hear another word spoken against her, if I even suspect that she has been made to feel unwelcome in my palace, I will take it as a personal insult to me. And you all know how I respond to insults. The noble had gone pale, bowing deeply, stammering apologies. After that, no one dared speak against her openly, though Seraphina knew the whispers continued behind closed doors. Her wolf grew stronger with each passing day, no longer a timid presence, but a confident force that prowled just beneath her skin. The beast was learning, adapting, growing into its power with a speed that surprised even Tobias. She could feel her senses sharpening, could smell emotions on people now, could hear conversations happening 3 rooms away if she focused. Her strength increased too, her human body becoming more muscular, more capable, as if the wolf's power was bleeding into her human form. Tobias arranged for her to train with his elite guards, the Shadowclaws, the finest warriors in the kingdom. These were wolves who had proven themselves in countless battles, who lived and breathed combat. At first, they were skeptical of this white-haired Omega, who their king insisted must be trained as if she were an alpha herself. But their skepticism turned to respect, and then to awe, as they watched Seraphina learn and grow. The captain of the Shadowclaws, a scarred veteran named Kale, took personal charge of her training. He was massive, even for a werewolf, with gray fur in his wolf form, and a face that looked like it had been carved from granite. He was gruff and demanding, pushing Seraphina hard, refusing to coddle her or treat her as weak. And Seraphina loved him for it. She threw herself into the training with a fierce determination, falling and rising, bleeding and healing, learning to control the shift with increasing precision. At first, her transformations were still painful, still unpredictable. Sometimes she would get stuck halfway between forms, her body locked in an agonizing limbo that left her screaming. Other times she would shift too quickly, the wolf taking over completely, and she would wake hours later in the forest with no memory of how she got there. But slowly, painfully, she learned. She learned to hold the edge between human and wolf, to shift only her hands into claws when she needed them, to strengthen her human body with her wolf's power without fully transforming. She learned to fight in both forms, to use her smaller size as an omega to her advantage, slipping under the guard of larger opponents, using speed and agility where she lacked brute strength. She learned to think like a predator, to read her opponent's movements, to anticipate attacks before they came. And most importantly, she learned to trust her instincts, to listen to her wolf's voice without letting it overwhelm her human reason. It was during one of these training sessions, 3 months after she had come to the palace, that everything changed. Seraphina was sparring with Kyle in wolf form in the palace training yard. The morning sun was bright, the air crisp with autumn chill. Other guards had gathered to watch, as they often did, fascinated by the white wolf who moved with increasing confidence and skill. Tobias stood at the edge of the yard, his arms crossed, his expression unreadable as he watched his mate train. Kale circled her, his massive gray wolf easily twice her size, testing her defenses. He lunged, and Seraphina dodged, her white form a blur of motion. They exchanged blows, neither gaining the advantage, a dance of tooth and claw that was beautiful in its violence. Then Kale changed tactics, going low, trying to sweep her legs out from under her. Seraphina saw the move coming, but instead of dodging, she jumped, her wolf's powerful legs propelling her over Kale's attack. She landed on his back, her jaws closing around his throat in a hold that should have been impossible for an omega. The pressure wasn't enough to break skin, but it was enough to make Kale freeze. For a long moment, neither of them moved. Then, slowly, the massive warrior began to lower himself to the ground, his wolf recognizing the dominance in her grip, submitting despite the fact that she was smaller, despite the fact that she was omega, despite everything that the pack hierarchy said was natural and right. When Seraphina released him and shifted back to human form, panting and sweating in the training clothes she wore, the entire yard was silent. Every wolf present was staring at her with expressions ranging from shock to awe to something that looked almost like fear. Kyle shifted back, touching his throat where her jaws had been, his eyes wide. "That was not the strength of an omega," he said, his voice rough with something that might have been respect or might have been unease. That was the strength of an alpha. Of a true alpha. Serafina looked at Tobias, who had gone very still, his eyes locked on her with an intensity that made her skin prickle. He crossed the yard in long strides, dismissing the guards with a gesture that brooked no argument, waiting until they were alone before speaking. That was not the strength of an Omega, he said, echoing Kale's words. That was the strength of an alpha of alpha blood. That's impossible, Serafina said. But even as she spoke, she felt the truth of his words resonating in her bones. Her wolf was not submissive. It never had been. It had simply been waiting, hiding its true nature. And now that it was awake, it would not be diminished or denied or put into a box labeled Omega just because that's what everyone expected. That's impossible, Serafina said. But even as she spoke, she felt the truth of his words resonating in her bones. Her wolf was not submissive. It never had been. It had simply been waiting. And now that it was awake, it would not be caged or diminished. Nothing about you is impossible, Tobias said. And he reached out, his fingers brushing a strand of white hair from her face. You're a mystery, Serafina Duskwood. And the more I learn about you, the more I want to know. His touch lingered, his thumb tracing the line of her jaw, and Serafina's breath caught as heat flooded through her. She had never been touched with such reverence, such barely restrained desire. The air between them seemed to crackle with tension, with all the unspoken words that had been building since that first night in the alley. Tobias, she whispered, and his name on her lips seemed to break something in him. He pulled her close, his arms wrapping around her with a fierceness that should have been frightening but instead felt like coming home. I can't, he said against her hair, his voice raw with emotion. I can't keep pretending this is just gratitude. I can't keep pretending I don't feel this pull between us. From the moment I saw you, from the moment I caught your scent, my wolf has been howling for you. Mine too, Serafina admitted, her hands fisting in his shirt. I don't understand it. I don't know what it means, but I feel it too. He pulled back just enough to look at her, his storm-gray eyes searching hers. The mate bond, he said softly. It's the only explanation. The moon has chosen you for me, and me for you. The words should have terrified her. The mate bond was sacred, eternal, the rarest gift the moon could bestow. But standing in Tobias's arms, feeling the rightness of his touch, the way their wolves sang to each other beneath their skin, Serafina felt only peace, only certainty. I'm afraid, she confessed. I don't know how to be what you need. I don't know how to be a mate to an alpha king. Tobias cupped her face in his hands, his touch so gentle it brought tears to her eyes. I don't need a queen, he said. I don't need someone perfect or powerful or political. I need you. Just you. The woman who shifted for the first time to save a stranger. The woman who sits with my mother and brings her comfort. The woman who makes me feel like I can breathe for the first time in years. Then he kissed her, and it was like lightning and moonlight and everything wild coming together in a single perfect moment. Serafina melted into him, her arms winding around his neck, her wolf howling with joy inside her chest. When they finally broke apart, both breathing hard, Tobias rested his forehead against hers. Stay with me, he said. Not as a guest, not for a debt, but as my mate, as my equal, as the other half of my soul. Yes, Serafina said, and this time there was no hesitation, no fear, only love, only certainty. Yes. The mating ceremony was held under the full moon, in the ancient grove where generations of wolves had pledged themselves to each other. The grove was sacred ground, protected by magic older than memory, where massive oaks twisted their branches toward the sky, and wildflowers grew thick as carpets. Lanterns hung from the trees, casting warm golden light that competed with the silver of the moon, and the air was thick with the scent of night-blooming jasmine and wild roses. Serafina wore a dress of white silk, that seemed to glow in the moonlight, hand-sewn by the palace seamstresses with tiny crystals that caught the light like captured stars. The dress flowed around her like water, leaving her arms bare, the neckline dipping low enough to show the graceful line of her collarbones. Her white hair had been left loose and wild down her back, woven with moonflowers that released their sweet perfume with every movement. She wore no jewelry except for a simple circlet of silver that rested on her brow, making her look like something out of legend, a moon goddess descended to earth. Tobias stood waiting for her at the center of the grove, and when she emerged from the path between the trees, his breath caught audibly. He was dressed in black, as always, but this was no ordinary clothing. His shirt was made of silk so fine it seemed to shimmer, embroidered with silver thread in patterns that mimicked wolf tracks and moon phases. His long hair had been braided with silver chains that glinted when he moved, and someone had woven dark flowers, nightshade and black roses, into the braids. He wore his crown, the heavy circlet of iron and silver that marked him as king, but Seraphina barely noticed it. She saw only him, only the man who looked at her like she was the most precious thing in all the world. The pack surrounded them, hundreds of wolves who had come to witness their alpha king claim his mate. They stood in concentric circles around the sacred stone at the heart of the grove, the youngest wolves in human form at the outer edges, the elders and council members closer in, and the elite guards forming an honor circle just beyond the stone itself. But as Seraphina walked the path toward Tobias, moving slowly as tradition demanded, she saw only him. The world narrowed to the man waiting for her, his storm-gray eyes never leaving her face. When she reached him, he took her hands in his, and the touch sent sparks of electricity racing up her arms, her wolf surging inside her with recognition and joy. His hands were shaking slightly, she realized, this powerful alpha king nervous as a boy taking his first mate. The thought made her love him even more. The elder performed the ritual, speaking the ancient words in the old tongue, the language of their ancestors. Seraphina didn't understand all of it, but she felt the power in the words, felt them wrapping around her and Tobias like invisible threads, binding them together. The elder called upon the moon to witness and bless their union, called upon the spirits of the forest to grant them strength, called upon the ancient magic of their kind to seal the bond that already existed between their souls. When the time came for them to speak their own vows, Tobias went first. His voice was rough with emotion, but it carried clear and strong through the grove, ensuring that every wolf present could hear. "Seraphina Duskwood," he said. His gray eyes locked on hers. "You came into my life on a night when I had lost hope. You saved my mother, not for reward or recognition, but because your heart is pure and your spirit is fierce. You woke your wolf for the first time not to save yourself, but to protect someone weaker. That is who you are. That is why the moon chose you for me. You are my light in the darkness. You are my peace in the storm. You are the other half of my soul, and I claim you, now and forever, as my mate, my equal, my partner in all things. I vow to protect you with my life, to honor you with my heart, to love you with every breath I take until the moon falls from the sky and the stars grow cold. You are mine, and I am yours, from this night until the end of all nights." Tears streamed down Seraphina's face, and when she spoke, her voice trembled but did not break. "Tobias Ironshade," she said, "you showed me that I was not broken, only waiting. You taught me that strength is not in how fiercely you fight, but in how gently you love. You gave me a home when I had none, a family when I was alone, a purpose when I thought I had nothing to offer. You see me, truly see me, and you love what you see. That is the greatest gift anyone has ever given me. I claim you as my mate, my king, my heart. I vow to stand beside you in joy and in sorrow, to be your strength when you falter, to be your peace when the world becomes too much. I will love you fiercely and gently, completely and eternally, from this night until the end of all nights and beyond." The elder placed their joined hands on the sacred stone, and Seraphina felt power surge through her, felt the mating bond snap into place with such force it stole her breath. She gasped, and Tobias's grip on her hands tightened, his own eyes wide with wonder. She could feel him now, not just physically but emotionally, his love for her flooding through the bond like a tidal wave, his joy and his devotion and his fierce protectiveness washing over her in waves that made her dizzy. And he could feel her too, she realized, watching his expression shift as he experienced her emotions, her overwhelming love for him, her gratitude, her absolute certainty that he was hers and she was his, and nothing would ever come between them. The bond settled between them like a living thing, pulsing with power, connecting them in ways that went beyond words or touch or thought. The elder smiled, ancient and knowing, and spoke the final words of the ritual. By the power of the moon and the blessing of our ancestors, I declare you mated, bound for eternity, two souls made one. Let all who witness know that what the moon has joined, no force on earth can tear asunder. The pack erupted in howls, the sound so loud and joyous it seemed to shake the very trees. But Seraphina and Tobias heard none of it. They were lost in each other, in the wonder of the bond, in the overwhelming rightness of this moment. Then, simultaneously, without planning or discussion, they shifted. When the time came for them to seal the bond, Tobias shifted, his massive black wolf towering over the gathered pack, easily the largest wolf present, his fur so dark it seemed to absorb the moonlight. Seraphina followed, her transformation smooth now, practiced, her white wolf gleaming like freshly fallen snow in the moonlight, almost luminescent against the darkness. Where Tobias's wolf was all power and dominance, hers was grace and speed. But together they were perfect, yin and yang, darkness and light, two halves of a complete whole. They touched noses, wolf to wolf, and Seraphina felt the bond deepen even further, felt her wolf recognize its mate with a certainty that transcended reason or doubt. Then they were running, racing through the forest together, their wolves chasing each other through moonbeams and shadow, playing and hunting and rejoicing in their union. The pack followed at a distance, giving them space but maintaining the connection, their howls echoing through the night in celebration. When they finally collapsed together in a clearing, sides heaving, Tobias shifted back to human form and pulled Seraphina into his arms, both of them naked and unashamed under the stars. "You are mine," he said, his voice hoarse with emotion, "and I am yours. From this night until the end of all nights." "Forever," Seraphina agreed, and kissed him as the moon looked down and blessed their union. The months that followed were the happiest of Seraphina's life. She settled into her role as the Alpha King's mate, with a grace that surprised even herself, attending councils, mediating disputes, becoming a voice for the weaker members of the pack who had always been overlooked. Tobias was never far from her side, his fierce devotion to her evident in every touch, every look, every moment they spent together. To the world, he remained the Alpha King, powerful and unyielding. But with her, in the privacy of their chambers, he was simply Tobias, the man who loved her with a fierceness that took her breath away. But happiness, Seraphina was learning, was a fragile thing. His mother's condition continued to deteriorate, the lucid moments becoming fewer and farther between. Tobias spent hours with her, trying to hold on to every fragment of recognition, every glimpse of the woman she had been. Seraphina stayed with them often, her presence seeming to bring the old woman comfort, even when she couldn't remember names or faces. It was on a night when the moon was dark, hidden behind thick clouds, that his mother took a turn for the worse. Seraphina woke to find Tobias's side of the bed empty, and she knew instantly where he would be. She found him in his mother's chamber, holding her hand, as the old woman struggled for breath. The healers stood nearby, their expressions grave, and Seraphina understood that this was the end. She moved to Tobias's other side, her hand coming to rest on his shoulder, offering what comfort she could. His mother's eyes, clouded with pain and confusion, flickered open, and for a moment, just a moment, they cleared. She looked at Tobias, then at Seraphina, and a smile crossed her face. "My son," she whispered. "You found her. You're moonborn. I knew you would." "I found her, Mother," Tobias said, his voice breaking. "She's here. Seraphina is here." The old woman's hand lifted, trembling, reaching for Seraphina. "Guard him, child," she said. "When the darkness comes, when he forgets who he is, you guard him. You are his light, his moon in the dark." "I promise," Seraphina said, tears streaming down her face. "I promise." The old woman smiled, content, and closed her eyes for the last time. The breath left her in a long, gentle sigh, and she was gone. Tobias's cry of grief was that of a wounded animal, raw and terrible, and Seraphina held him as he shattered, held him as he raged against the unfairness of it, held him as he finally broke down and wept like a child. The funeral was held with all the ceremony befitting the mother of an alpha king. The entire pack mourned, the howls of grief echoing through the night. But it was Tobias's howl that cut the deepest, a sound of such profound loss that it made even the strongest wolves weep. Seraphina stood beside him throughout it all, his hand gripping hers like a lifeline, her presence the only thing keeping him anchored to the world. In the weeks that followed, Seraphina watched Tobias withdraw into himself, the grief eating at him like a disease. He threw himself into his duties, working until exhaustion claimed him, refusing to talk about his mother, refusing to process the loss. To the pack, he remained strong, the unshakable alpha king. But Seraphina saw the cracks, saw the way his hands shook when he thought no one was looking, saw the haunted look in his eyes. She tried to reach him, tried to break through the walls he had erected, but he pushed her away with a gentleness that was somehow worse than anger. "I'm fine," he would say. "I just need time." But time passed and he only seemed to retreat further, until Seraphina felt like she was losing him, watching him slip away into a darkness she couldn't penetrate. It all came to a head one night when Seraphina found him in his private study, drunk and staring at a portrait of his mother. She had never seen him like this, disheveled and vulnerable, the mask of the Alpha King completely stripped away. He looked at her with eyes full of such pain, it made her chest ache. "I failed her," he said, his words slurring slightly. "I was supposed to protect her. I'm the Alpha King. I'm supposed to protect everyone. But I couldn't save her. I couldn't even ease her suffering." Seraphina crossed to him, kneeling beside his chair, taking his face in her hands. "You did everything you could," she said firmly. "You loved her. You cared for her. You were with her at the end. That's not failure, Tobias. That's devotion." "It wasn't enough," he said, and the tears that fell from his eyes broke her heart. "I'm not enough. I never have been." "You are enough," Seraphina said, her voice fierce now. "You are more than enough. You are the man who became king not through cruelty, but through strength and compassion. You are the man who treats the lowest servant with the same respect as the highest noble. You are the man who has shown me what it means to be loved without condition. You are enough, Tobias. You have always been enough." He stared at her, and something in his expression shifted, the walls crumbling just a fraction. "How do you do that?" he asked. "How do you see me so clearly?" "Because you showed me how," Seraphina said. "Because when I thought I was broken, you showed me I was just waiting. Let me do the same for you now. Let me be your light in the dark, just as your mother asked." Tobias pulled her into his arms, holding her so tightly she could barely breathe. And finally, he let himself break. He wept against her shoulder, great wrenching sobs that shook his entire body. and Serafina held him through it all, whispering words of comfort and love, promising him that he was not alone, that he would never be alone again. When the storm passed, when he was empty and exhausted, Tobias pulled back just enough to look at her. "I don't deserve you," he said. "You don't get to decide that," Serafina replied with a small smile. "The moon chose us for each other. And I choose you, every day, in every way. The broken parts, the strong parts, all of you." "I love you," Tobias said, and the words held a weight they hadn't before, as if he was finally allowing himself to truly feel them. "I love you more than I thought possible." "I love you too," Serafina said, and kissed him softly. "Now come to bed. Let me hold you. Let me remind you that you're not alone." They slept tangled together that night, and when morning came, Serafina saw a change in him. The grief was still there, would always be there, but it no longer consumed him. He had finally allowed himself to lean on her, to accept the strength she offered, and in doing so, had begun to heal. The seasons turned, winter giving way to spring, and life in the palace found a new rhythm. Tobias slowly returned to himself, though he was changed, softer in some ways, more open. He spoke of his mother often now, sharing memories, both painful and joyful, and Serafina listened, always listening, always there. Their bond deepened in ways she hadn't known possible, until she could feel his emotions as if they were her own, until they moved together as one being in two bodies. It was on a night in early spring, when Serafina realized the truth. She had been feeling strange for weeks, her senses heightened, her wolf restless and protective. When she finally allowed herself to acknowledge what her body was telling her, tears of joy streamed down her face. She was pregnant. She was carrying the heir to the Alpha King. She told Tobias that night, in their bed, her hand pressed against her still flat stomach. His reaction was everything she could have hoped for, and more. He dropped to his knees before her, his hands covering hers, his eyes wet with tears as he looked up at her with such love, such awe, that she felt her heart might burst. "Our child," he whispered. "Our miracle." He was impossibly gentle with her from that moment on, treating her like she was made of spun glass, driving her to distraction with his overprotective hovering. But Serafina loved him for it, loved the way he talked to her belly when he thought she was asleep, loved the way he planned for their future with such hope and joy. The pack rejoiced at the news, the palace filling with preparations and celebration. But fate, it seemed, was not done testing them. On a night when Serafina was 6 months along, her belly round and full, an attack came. Rogue wolves, driven mad by some dark magic, breached the palace walls in numbers they had never seen before. The alarm went up, and Tobias was instantly in alpha mode, commanding his forces, organizing the defense. He tried to send Serafina to the safe rooms, but she refused. "I'm your mate," she said firmly, even as he growled his disapproval. "I fight beside you. You're carrying our child," Tobias argued, his fear for her naked on his face. "Which is exactly why I fight," Serafina replied, "because I will not let our child grow up in a world where I hid while others died to protect us." She shifted, her white wolf massive and powerful now, no longer the timid creature that had first awakened in an alley, but a force of nature. Tobias looked at her, and she saw the moment he accepted her decision, the moment his fear transformed into pride. His black wolf appeared beside hers, and together they raced into battle. The fight was brutal, the rogues fighting with a mindlessness that made them unpredictable and dangerous. But Serafina and Tobias moved as one, anticipating each other's movements, protecting each other's weaknesses. She watched him tear through their enemies, fierce and lethal, the Alpha King in all his terrible glory. And when a rogue lunged at his exposed flank, she was there, her jaws closing around its throat, ending the threat before it could reach him. The battle seemed to last for hours, though it was likely only minutes. When the last rogue fell, when silence finally descended over the palace grounds. Seraphina and Tobias stood together, covered in blood and breathing hard. He shifted first, pulling her human form into his arms, his hands frantically checking her for injuries. "The baby," he said, his voice raw with fear. "Is the baby okay?" Seraphina pressed her hand to her stomach, reaching inward with her wolf senses, and felt the strong, steady heartbeat of their child. "We're fine," she said, tears of relief streaming down her face. "We're both fine." Tobias buried his face in her hair, his body shaking. "When I saw you fighting, when I saw that rogue coming at you..." He couldn't finish, couldn't voice the terror that had gripped him. "I know," Seraphina said softly. "I felt it too. But we're okay. We're all okay." In the aftermath of the attack, as they worked to heal the wounded and mourn the fallen, Seraphina understood something fundamental about their bond. They were not just mates. They were partners, warriors, two halves of a whole that was stronger together than either could be apart, and their child would be born into a world made safe by their love and their willingness to fight for it. The baby came on a night when the moon was full and bright, hanging low in the sky like a blessing. The labor was long and difficult, and Tobias stayed beside Seraphina throughout, holding her hand, whispering words of encouragement and love, his face pale with worry. When their daughter finally entered the world, when her first cry pierced the air, Tobias wept openly, taking the tiny bundle in his arms with such care, such wonder, that Seraphina fell in love with him all over again. "She has your hair," he said, marveling at the white downy fuzz that covered their daughter's head. "And my eyes." "She's perfect," Seraphina said, exhausted but glowing with happiness. They named her Luna, after the moon that had brought them together, and she was indeed perfect. A tiny miracle with her father's strength and her mother's spirit. The pack celebrated for days, the palace filled with joy and laughter for the first time since the old queen's death. Watching Tobias with their daughter was a revelation. The fierce Alpha King was reduced to a puddle of devotion by this tiny creature, singing to her in the old tongue, carrying her everywhere, his massive hands so gentle as he changed her and fed her and rocked her to sleep. Seraphina would find him in the nursery at all hours, just watching Luna sleep, his expression one of such profound love it brought tears to her eyes. One night, when Luna was a few months old, Seraphina found Tobias sitting in the rocking chair with their daughter asleep on his chest. He looked up as she entered, and the smile that crossed his face was so soft, so content, that her breath caught. "Do you remember that night in the alley?" he asked quietly. "When I first saw you. How could I forget?" Seraphina said, moving to sit on the floor beside the chair, her head resting against his leg. "I knew then," Tobias said. "The moment I caught your scent, my wolf recognized you as mine. I thought I was imagining it, thought it was gratitude or attraction or simple loneliness. But it wasn't. It was fate. The moon brought you to my mother so that you would be brought to me." "Your mother said something similar," Seraphina remembered. "She said I was sent to you." "She saw true," Tobias said. "She always did at the end. And now look at us. A moon-born Omega who turned out to be as strong as any Alpha, mated to a king who learned that strength means nothing without love. And this," he looked down at Luna, sleeping peacefully, "this miracle we created together." "I never thought I would have this," Seraphina confessed. "A family. A home. Someone who loves me not despite my differences, but because of them." "You gave me that too," Tobias said. "You taught me that it's okay to be vulnerable, that needing someone doesn't make you weak, that love is the greatest strength of all." They sat in comfortable silence, watching their daughter sleep, both of them acutely aware of how lucky they were, how easily they could have missed each other, if Seraphina had walked away that night. if she had kept her wolf asleep, if Tobias had not recognized her as his mate. But the moon had known. The moon had brought them together in that alley, had woken Seraphina's wolf, had bound them together in a love that would endure for all their days. Years passed in this way, filled with joy and challenges, with love and laughter and the occasional crisis that comes with ruling a pack. Luna grew into a spirited child with her mother's compassion and her father's strength, a perfect blend of both. More children followed, 2 sons who inherited their father's black hair and commanding presence, but who had their mother's gentle hearts. Tobias remained the Alpha King, respected and feared by his enemies, loved by his pack. But with Seraphina, he was simply a man, devoted and tender, never losing the softness he showed only to her and their children. She remained his anchor, his light in the darkness, the one person who could reach him when the weight of the crown became too heavy. On the anniversary of the night they met, Tobias took Seraphina back to that alley, now cleaned up and safe, a small plaque marking the spot where her wolf had first awakened. They stood together in the moonlight, his arms around her back pressed against his chest, and remembered. "I almost didn't come to the palace that day," Seraphina confessed. "I almost threw away your card and went back to my invisible life." "I would have found you anyway," Tobias said with certainty. "I would have searched every corner of the kingdom. My wolf would have driven me mad until I found you." "I'm glad you didn't have to," Seraphina said. "I'm glad I was brave enough to say yes." "You've always been brave," Tobias said, turning her in his arms so he could see her face. "From the moment you shifted to save my mother, you've been the bravest person I know. You saved her. You saved me. You saved us all, really." "We saved each other," Seraphina corrected. "That's what mates do." He kissed her then, long and deep, pouring all his love into the contact. And Seraphina felt her wolf sing with contentment inside her chest. They were home. Not in a place, but in each other. And nothing, not time, not death, not fate itself, could ever tear them apart. When they finally returned to the palace, their children ran to greet them, Luna with her white hair flying, the boys tumbling over each other in their eagerness. Tobias scooped them all up, his laughter rich and warm, and Seraphina watched with a heart so full she thought it might overflow. This was her pack, her family, her life, born from a single moment of courage on a fog-filled night when a moon-born Omega had finally let her wolf wake. And as the moon rose high and bright over the palace, casting its silver light across the kingdom, Seraphina whispered a prayer of gratitude to the forces that had brought them together. She had been alone for so long, invisible, unwanted, broken, but she wasn't any of those things. She never had been. She had simply been waiting for the right moment, the right person, the right love to wake her up and show her who she truly was. Moonborn, Alpha King's mate, mother, warrior, beloved. She was all these things and more, and as Tobias's arms wrapped around her from behind, as their children played at their feet, as the pack howled its joy at the full moon above, Seraphina knew with absolute certainty that she had finally found where she belonged, in his arms, in this palace, in this family, in this love that would burn bright until the end of all nights and beyond. We'd love to hear your thoughts on this beautiful love story. Let us know what you thought of this tale full of emotions and surprises. Tell us your name, where you're watching from, and rate this story from 0 to 10 if it touched your heart. And if you enjoyed the plot, don't forget to leave a like and subscribe to the channel so you don't miss the amazing new stories coming soon. See you next time.